The ruling Patriotic Front in Zambia says it is consulting on the next course of action concerning the general elections held on Thursday, the 12th of August. Party President Edgar Lungu says the general election in the three provinces were characterized by violence, rendering the whole exercise null and void. The contested provinces include the Southern Province, the Northwestern Province and the Western Province. Lungu is contesting that Patriotic Front polling agents were brutalized and chased from polling stations. He says the situation left the ruling party's votes unprotected in the three provinces. The president has also cited the killing of Patriotic Front Northwestern Province chairperson Jackson Kungo during voting and Samuel Chihili shortly before the voting as criminal acts that rendered the general election not free and fair. To further discuss the developments in Zambia, let's now invite researcher and political analyst Ringisai Chico Mohero, who is joining us now from Pretoria. Ringisai, very good evening to you. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to the Globe.
Good evening, and thank you for having me.
It's not looking good for President Edgar Lungu now, is it?
No, not at all. And with all the benefit of incumbency, this is one of an embarrassing moment. He's almost like clutching on straws to try and save his waning legacy.
Yeah, since the vote counting is still in progress, can we at this stage, say for sure that he really has lost the election?
Not really. I mean, in elections, it's not over until the last ballot has been counted for. So we still have to hold our breath. But what we are seeing from his own side, from his party side and himself, are indicative of someone who is running scared. What is interesting when you look at what has happened so far is his rival is leading by almost the same margin that the rival lost to him in 2016. And it is quite unsettling for him. So his own actions are indicative of where this thing might be going.
But can his insinuation that the elections are not free and fair because of the criminal acts in the Northwestern Province, can these allegations or insinuations hold any water? Would they stand in a court of law?
Well, it's all about optics and narratives and trying to mobilize people. And it depends on how he wants to maneuver this. The reality is the elections have been far from being free and fair, yes, and this is not really, is the opposite of what is happening. The Electoral Commission of Zambia has failed to really live up to the Electoral Process Act of 2016. They've denied the opposition media play in the public media. The opposition has been denied the ability to mobilize and campaign, especially in the last month. And the main opposition has been treated with the most heavy-handedness. So it hasn't been free and fair, but actually on the side of the opposition. The ruling party, which is President Lungu's PF, tried to do all it can to make the playing field uneven and favor them.
Well, we're getting reports that Mr. Hichilema has now gained ground in some provinces, in particular, where, they were perceived as Edgar Lungu's strongholds. What could have possibly gone wrong in terms of Mr. Edgar Lungu's influence? Is it perhaps the clearest indication that Zambians don't want to have anything to do with Mr. Lungu?
Yeah, so two things I'd play here. Clearly, Mr. Hichilema has done his homework. This is his sixth time running, and I think he has been working on himself. He was earlier perceived to be an elitist, a businessman. He's a billionaire. So he's been perceived to be out of touch with reality, not relating to what Zambians go through. But he has really done his homework and done his groundwork. And these are the fruits of it. But that is not all. President Lungu on his own part has really mismanaged the economy. He has shown a lot of policy inconsistency. He has shown he is eccentric and he has not been solid in terms of finding mechanism to bring back Zambia to a state where it is benefiting from the commodity price, which has been very favorable for them in the recent months. So from a country which had a debt that was forgiven when it was declared a highly indebted country, to a country with a $12 billion debt during his watch, he has really shown to the Zambians that they need an alternative. And you can take this as a protest for not so much of Ms. Hichilema's work, though he has to be credited for doing his homework, but the majority of the citizens that are protesting from hyperinflation, their salaries and incomes have been wiped. They can barely afford their basics, and they are sinking into poverty every day. So this is more of a a rejection of Lungu than an appreciation of his opponent.
Yeah, as you say, the country is highly indebted and suffered the continent's first pandemic-era sovereign default last November. And now we understand that the International Monetary Fund has also held off on its support, well, at least until the vote. So some analysts and some perhaps pro-Lungu personnel that may be opining that the IMF is now being partisan in this whole operation. What do you think of that?
Well, I mean, it's always a failure of many African governments to try and find a scapegoat, and the West has been an easier scapegoat. But what is the honest truth is said, in the last 11 years that the PF government has been in power, the debt has ballooned from a couple of billions to 12 billion. That is external debt alone. Combine it with the internal debt, it's at 19 billion. And this has all happened in the space of 11 years. You remember a few years ago when Zambia was a HIPC and its debt was forgiven. So they started from scratch and built up a debt to 12 billion. So clear mismanagement has happened. And for the IMF to trust, they need stability, they need confidence in policies, they need to understand that some certain austerity measures are going to be put in place, and the government has to rein in its appetite for spending, its appetite for borrowing, and its appetite for vanity projects that Mr. Lungu has embarked on as some kind of vote-buying initiatives in the last few years. So you can't fault a financial institution for desiring stability, for desiring to have confidence, and for desiring some strategic planning and policy direction in Zambia.
You know, it's not unusual that an aggrieved party in every election, in particular in the African political scene, always cries foul of vote rigging and irregularity, and some often take the legal route and try to contest the election through the courts. And in some instances, the aggrieved party don't normally get the kind of recourse that they want in the court. So what are some of the options available for incumbent President Edgar Lungu at this particular point?
Well, so the only legal options that he has is to go through the courts. And it's very indicative. He might be actually now eating the fruits of his own cake. In 2016, when the opposition lost and approached the court, the petition has still not been settled. That is 5 years later. So now the reality is now he's facing the same reality that his own opponent faced when he won. But there is no other recourse. And I think people have to remind each other that the prerogative of declaring an election free and fair rests in Zambia with the Electoral Commission of Zambia and the observer missions. We've already begun to see in some reports from the EU, from Commonwealth, which are speaking to the incumbents' advantage position rather than the opposition's advantage position. So it will be very difficult for Mr. Lungu to prove his case in the next few days, but he has that route open. I do not see the Zambian military siding with him, though they've been deployed in the streets in the last 2 to 3 weeks. This is not the first time Zambia has changed guard, and is prided as one of those stable democracies in Africa where power has changed, I think 3 times now, seamlessly and without any violence.
And what is particularly noteworthy is that the majority of the registered voters was young Zambians. So does this give us an indication of the entire makeup of Zambia's political scene in terms of some of the grievances that have been put forth by the Zambians and the government's propensity to deal with some of those issues?
Yeah, I think what has happened here is the young people are the ones who have borne the brunt of the economic hardships. There is high unemployment, especially amongst the youth. There is limited opportunities for gainful economic activities. And they've seen the social space being squeezed and clamped down over the last 5 years. And all these frustrations affect young people more than the elderly. So this is a vote that is really indicative of what has been happening in the economy and in the social and political space, where the young people need a voice and they don't find expression in the current status quo in Zambia.